Hello, hi.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right.
Awesome. Hello to all of our followers, and thank you for joining us for another episode of The Author Tells. This is our first authors, Varun Gwalani. How are you, Varun?
Guys.
Okay, so Varun, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do?
Sure. My name's Varun Gwalani. I am an author, teacher. I talk a lot about mental health, I write a lot of poetry. I teach creative writing as a whole. I do educational consultancy often for English and writing. And so I actually have written about 5 books. My last 2 books are on the Saga app, and Neerja has edited the last 2 of my last 3 books. So this is not new. This is not new ground for us.
Long history, yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yes, Neerja is also editing my next project, which you all will find out about soon.
Yes, this is not the last you've seen of us. It's definitely not.
Yeah. I mean, I've written 5 books and I'm not 30. This is definitely not the last you've seen of me. Like, I'm not going anywhere, clearly.
100%.
Sorry, Neerja, you were saying.
Yeah. No. So you've clearly done a lot. I'm not gonna say for such a young age because that's cliche. There's no right age to do all of these things. But so how did you decide to become a writer? Like, why did you want to be a writer?
I'm going to be cliche now and say that I don't know if one decides to be a writer. I feel like one either is or isn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, personally speaking, of course. So, I mean, I think writing was inevitable for me. It was part of my nature. It was part of who I was. It was part of, so essentially everything in my writing inculcates and incorporates how I see the world, or how I interact, and how I sort of interact, react to the world, let's say. All right. For example, in my writing, you'll find a lot of deep thoughts, a lot of how human beings live with each other, how human beings hurt each other and love each other. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of sadness, but at the end of that sadness, most often there is hope. It's about inevitably how you get out from that trauma, mm-hmm. and eventually go into, sorry, one sec.
That's all right.
Sorry, it's how you're just going to have to edit this out. Just sorry. Someone just came into my...
Just pause it and then we can edit it.
No, it's fine. So it's essentially about how human beings then interact, take that trauma, mm-hmm. and find something good out of it, and find something meaningful out of it. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what all of my writing is about. It's about finding meaning in places and times where you might not see any meaning, or you might not have any meaning. So because I do that so vividly in my own life, or I try to do that so vividly in my own life, that sort of translates into my books. And the desire to constantly talk about that is what leads me to writing anyway.
Okay, so would you say then that your art literally imitates your life?
Yes, for better, for worse, most of the time, yeah.
So that's what
my art is. I mean, everyone's art is intensely personal in that way. Mm-hmm. But I feel like my writing in and of itself, mm-hmm. helps me to resolve things in my life, or helps me to make sense of things in my life, or helps me in a way to have that essentially cathartic experience, like in a true Greek sense, that of catharsis, of a revelation of feelings that you have within you.
So at what point do you think then that it stops being sort of catharsis and being inspired by your own life and starts become autobiographical? Because I've heard a lot of arguments where people say that if you borrow from your life, that you're sort of limiting yourself to your experiences and nothing beyond that. But where do you think, is there a line, or is it just sort of a gray area?
So generally, when you start with authors, even when they start, they often put a lot of themselves in their work, right? And I found that as they become better authors, they can then choose to stop putting themselves in their work. It's they often do still, but then it becomes less of it becomes more of a choice, right, than a mistake. So when I wrote Believe for the first time, a lot of me was in that book unintentionally, right? When I wrote the first Storyteller, which is my second book, a lot of that was very much intentional, right? But now when I wrote Story Circle, as you know, I was in the background. I was talking about my experiences with children and how they are, right? Now, when you look at Who Saves the Hero, you'll find that it's me from a distance. It's like me from what I would have been or might have been 10, 20, 30 years ago. Sean, at this moment, in this writing, is not at all like me at this moment, right? So it is still me, but it is a choice as to how much I've included and how distant Sean is as a character from me. Now, when you look at the novel here, very few of the characters are me, right? There is only about one or maybe two characters. One is very much like me, which is the OCD story, which is very explicitly like me. I make no bones with the fact that it's like me, right? But every other character is not like me. So I have now, and I wrote novel here, and then I wrote Who Saves the Hero, almost one after the other. So it was not like I had a big growth in terms of writer, right? I chose then to put more of myself in one, in what context, and more of myself in the second, and in what context. And I think I'm able to do that now because as a writer, I've grown that much that I can modulate my skill level.
Yeah, of course. Speaking of, so your other characters, so obviously parts of Sean or I inevitably end up calling it Sean. I never
even I will like that's
the hero.
But it's Who Saves the Hero, guys. Go read it. Sorry, go on.
The story, parts of the main character are influenced by your own life. But what about the other characters? So you tend to have a lot of, no matter who the protagonist might be, you tend to have a lot of strong female characters. So are those inspired by personal life? Are those characters that you wish you had read more of, earlier in literature? How do you come up with those characters?
All right. So generally speaking, when I write anything, it's a book that I would like to see in the world. That's for anything, right? If I try to reflect essentially a space in life that is currently not there. If there is something lacking in the literature I see today, I would want that to be there. That's why I would write it so that it is there, right? And of course, strong female characters are a large part of that, right? Because I feel in media as a whole, there is now especially a temptation to just write strong women as just strong without no flaws, right? It went from one extreme to the other, right? Just because we have to write strong women, they can't have any flaws, and they can't be, just because they're strong, they can't be emotional and things like that, right? So I want, in the end, what I try very hard to do is to write real people, right? So if I write women, they're women who are powerful, but also are flawed in some way. Either they may be too angry, or they may be too emotional, or they may be too, they may be trying to make up for something, or they may be trying to achieve something, right? So I don't think when I write, I try to put their experiences as much as possible. But at the same time, I don't try to think and write, oh, I'm writing a female character. Right? I'm just writing a person as I see them. And I'm lucky in the sense that I have been inspired and surrounded by so many incredible females, not female, women. I was about to say female characters, but women. Yeah. I did arts. So I had about 200 guys and like 5 girls in my 200 girls and 5 guys in my entire class. So the ratio was a little staggering, as you can imagine. And because of that, I got to experience a full gamut of women as people, right? Like, because when you interact with about 100, 200 women, you're not going to see them as one monolith, right? You're going to start to see individual differences in all of them. Yeah. And I think that experience taught me a lot about the kind of experiences, the kind of struggles, the kinds of how this distinction, that this false binary that they try to create men and women, ultimately is baseless, because ultimately everybody has the same emotions, the same problems, the same struggles. Maybe they're in different ways, but if I as a man am lonely and you as a woman are lonely, then you may express it in different ways because of the way society has sort of shaped both of us, right? Because of the restrictions of our society. But ultimately, the loneliness is the same emotion, right? And so even in Sean, and in a lot of my male characters, the male characters are characters who are struggling with their masculinity. Because I find that I have often struggled with the idea of what it means to be masculine in a society, right? So writing strong women comes at the natural end of that point, the side of that point, right? Because if you see feminism from a perspective where men are sort of subdued because of the patriarchy and therefore not allowed to show their emotionality, you will see women as too emotional, as slaughtered as too emotional, when they are just showing natural human emotions.
Of course, yeah.
For all who are watching, I'm sorry I'm talking too fast. This is just how I talk. Neerja, please tell me to slow down if I need to.
You're doing good. Don't worry about it. Do not worry about it. Yeah. So, like you said, the main subject or the theme of Sean is the fact that men's emotions are often just disregarded or labeled as not manly. So is that sort of what made you want to write the story? I mean, consciously, is that a driving force that you say, okay, this is the character that I want to write because I want to combat that? And how would you suggest combating that in real life? Because I'm sure a lot of men struggle with reaching out and speaking up and being vulnerable. It's something that they're not taught, and it's something that they don't see often in other males around their life. So how
Okay. So, Sean, yes, was built on a large part about how men are not allowed to be emotional, but Sean now reflects an interesting facet of that has sort of come within my life as well. Now, Sean, because he sort of accepts his emotionality so much, he wears it on his sleeve, right? Because he says that I am so emotional, and I'm not allowed to be, so I'm going to be extra emotional and no one can stop me, right? He sort of defined him in his emotionality. The problem is that when he's defiance is still another sign of insecurity, right? It's still a sign that you're insecure in what you're doing. So then people take advantage of Sean's insecurity. They take advantage of the fact that Sean is a giving, caring person who holds his heart on his sleeve, and sort of tries to take that heart and not allow anyone else to have it. Right. So in that way, it sort of shows the way those kind of people can be manipulated in society. Not to give too much of season 2 and 3 away, but it's sort of, which is why I'm not saying it's elaborating too much on that, but it sort of shows how Sean itself is allowed to be manipulated, even though he's an emotional man, simply because once more he's not allowed to be. And that I think is another aspect of men's emotionalism that nobody talks about, right? That you can be emotional, but that doesn't mean then you can't be abused or manipulated.
Of course.
Because it's very easy to think that men can't be hurt, men can't be abused, men can't be assaulted because they're men, so to speak, right? And this shows in that way that they can, that it's still a problem, and that needs to be countered. Nobody's saying it's a bigger problem or a smaller problem, because that inevitably for the conclusion goes in, right? Oh, but women have it worse, men have it less. But it's not about that.
That's not the point of the argument. It's the point.
Exactly. It's not about one or the other.
You have to counter.
Exactly. It's not a competition as to who has it worse. It's not a race to the bottom, right? And and if we're approaching feminism in that way, then we need to approach feminism as a way to counter everyone's problems, right? Because it's only when everyone's problems are destroyed can the patterns that enable those problems be destroyed. Because it's ultimately the patterns that are the ones that are enabling the whole system, so to speak.
Absolutely.
So to address your second part of the question, I feel like men should then be allowed to express what they feel. I feel like men should allow other men to express what they feel. I think that's particularly important because men often find safer to talk to women than to other men. Right? They will talk to their spouses. They will talk to their sisters, maybe. They will talk to then societally acceptable places to be emotional. Whereas what they need to be is it needs to be societally acceptable to be emotional at any time, right? Without having to suffer the consequences of being called weak or a sissy or unmasculine or less than, right? Because that's ultimately what it's all about. It's all about shame. It's the shame culture that we sort of live in now, where everyone is so hell-bent and so eager to shame everybody else that until we end that culture of shaming everybody else, it's not going to.
Absolutely, I agree. That's really good advice, and I hope soon we're able to create safe spaces for everyone, regardless of who they identify as, to speak up about whatever is happening in their life and help them through it. But so here's the main thing, right? Sean, as it stands now, is very different from what it started on. Before anyone gets mad, it's not because of the editor. It's because so before anyone gets mad, it's not because of the editors. It's because of most suggestions that came from Varun himself. So how was that sort of journey from turning Sean from that first draft to what it is now?
So for those watching, I will take some of the Saga blame out of this. So when Saga saw the first draft, so a lot of people who are going to be reading Sean probably have read it that first draft, so they're going to see vast changes. But for those who are not in the know, Sean was originally a very different concept. It was a much worse concept. I mean, nobody at Saga thought that. They were all fine with the original draft. I was not.
He was intended for something completely different. That's the thing.
Exactly.
It had a different audience. It had different.
Yeah, exactly. But I after a lot, I essentially rewrote the entire thing. They thought that they were just getting an edit. I just rewrote the whole thing. Anyway, so the reason that I did that was because Sean, in the beginning, when I wrote it was a very crude expression of something I didn't understand at that moment. It was a sort of crude expression of the turbulence and the, like I mentioned earlier, the emotionality and the difficulty in expressing emotion of that teenage in that teenage adolescent time was something that I did not really know how to deal with. And honestly, I didn't have enough hindsight to deal with. I did not have enough emotional maturity to deal with. So, so eventually, when I look back at Sean now, I saw a young boy trying to express what it was like to be someone who was being manipulated emotionally, but who did not know that that was the case. Right. So I wanted, with the gift of hindsight and emotional maturity and an understanding of who I was then, was able to write that. It's sort of like you looking back at your teenage years and thinking that kid was going through something that he didn't understand then, but now he understands. Yeah.
I get that. Oh, you're...
Sorry. Huh.
That's okay. Okay. So what is now, as it stands, what is one thing that you really, really love about your book and one that you dislike that you might kind of want to change maybe?
Which one?
What do you mean?
I have 2 out on the Saga fiction app, Neerja.
No. Who saves the hero? Just, well, that's the main focus. So in
that's the main focus. Okay. I don't know if there's anything I particularly want to change. I have a very good editor who has helped me work out most of the kinks. I have a reasonably tolerant publisher who has accepted all of my whims. So that is okay. The only thing I would like is for it to have a bigger audience. So that's up to you all who's watching it.
Fair enough.
That's not me.
Sorry.
Yeah, if there is something I like about Sean, I like that it's accessible. I like that it's accessible to everyone. I like that it tells the story that it was meant to tell. If I had to say, I don't know if this is a bad thing, but I would say that Sean is not like the other stuff I write. It's a little simpler. It's not necessarily a bad thing for it to be simple. It's just a different thing. That's
I actually find that it's not worse or better. It's just...
Yeah, exactly. It's different. That's what I'm saying.
Because there are sometimes just simpler ways of conveying things that might
exactly
in the world. But
yeah. So it's sort of a mid-range when it comes to my writing. It's higher than the children's novel, obviously, but it's still lower than, let's say, Believe. So it's not too simple, but it's not too complicated. It's a new sort of middle space that I've sort of written in for me, and I hope that makes it a little more accessible to everyone.
Yeah. So would you be willing to explore that space again, something similar, but maybe about something else that's really close to your heart?
I suppose so. I don't know. Honestly, all the books that I've written have all just been different genres. At this point, I have written one new genre for every book. I don't know anyone.
I think you should mention all the... This was going to be my question. Like, you've written so much. So would you like to tell us about like the genres
Sure.
you've written so far?
So
your favorite.
So we have a realistic. So we have Believe was a psychological thriller, right? First Storyteller was sort of a magic realist postmodernist novel. First Storyteller in itself had all the genres. So that's Then Story Circle is children's novel, right? Then The Novel Year is sort of realistic fiction. And Who Saves the Hero is sort of young adult fiction.
Yeah.
Right. Note that I say sort of, because not all of them are actually that genre itself. They all have interminglings of other in it as well.
I mean, it's really difficult. Honestly, I find that for most books, it's difficult to just sort of slot it into one particular genre, because there's so much to the book, right? I mean, it might not be about just one thing, so that's understandable. It's fair not to just label it as one particular thing. That's okay. But which one was your favorite to write so far out of all of these?
I don't know. They all had their charms. They all had something meaningful or something special about them. The Who Saves the Hero was a throwback. Was like sort of writing the story of your own childhood. The novel here was catharsis for an entire generation of traumatized people. Then the first storyteller was a very, very meaningful book that pretty much saved my life. The story circle was a way of connecting with my students and children and represented something of pure joy. Believe was sort of my first book. So they all have something meaningful to it. And I think because they all have something meaningful to it, they all are not discordant that way. I'd like to think that if you read all of those books, you'd still find me in all of those books, because no matter the genre, it just shows the different facets of life within those genres and how human beings can have multitudes within them.
Absolutely. It's sort of you in different times. It's you in different different times.
It's me. Yeah. It's not just me in different times. It's me. I think more of it's me and how I see the world, and me and how this sounds very cheesy to say, but me and how I love and hope, because ultimately it's all about how you find hope and how you find hope in those different circumstances. It's sort of a way of reminding you different ways to hope and different ways to dream and different ways to love.
Absolutely. Okay. So then I think everyone should go read all of the books and then come back to comment if you agree and what. But
yes.
Okay, the main question. I know you've very eagerly been waiting for the iOS launch, and now it has finally happened. So, what are you reading now? What are you currently reading on Saga Fiction?
Yes, to give context to everybody, I've been calling Saga every few days, asking them when the book will be available on iOS. So now it is there, and you guys better read it. Thanks. Not you. You need you guys.
No, this is for other people.
Yeah, of course. I'm actually quite interested in all the different books that are there. There's quite a few genres there itself, and they all promise interesting reading. There is, for example, a book about fairy tales, different fairy tales, which I believe you have. Yeah, you have worked on Neerja, right? Yeah. I'm just sorry.
It was such a delight to work with.
Yeah. That's one I'm going to pick up now. There's an erotica there. There's series of short stories which a certain editor of mine has contributed to, which I am also looking forward to.
Wow, I don't know what that is.
Yes, what was the name of that?
I think it's called Ishmael. I think.
Yes, I heard it's good as Vada Pav. I'm gonna try it.
It's an amazing combination. Do it.
I'm definitely going to try.
Yeah, do it.
Sorry?
But everyone else out there too, do it.
Yes, I'm definitely going to do it. There is a really interesting K-pop fiction one that I am interested in reading. There, Sacha Fortune's Amalgamated Darkness seems quite nice as well. So there is a lot to explore. And there is a lot to read, and I'm really looking forward to reading all of it. And honestly, hopefully, I hope we create this sort of community of authors and sort of help embrace this idea, especially in Indian fiction and Indian literature, that new genres, new themes, new ideas are possible, and there's and they're so enriching and rewarding. And that's all the more reason we should embrace them.
Absolutely, I agree. I hope you get to read all of these very soon, and I hope
I will.
All of them. So I think that's all we have for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope you had fun. Go read all of Varun's books, but especially read Who Saves the Hero, because I was involved.
Yes.
But no,
yes,
and leave lots of comments on our app, on Instagram, whatever social media you want. We would love to. I know we both have feedback people, so we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Write fan fiction, make cover art. Like tell us your hit cannons. Do all of it. We love all of it.
Absolutely. Okay. Well,
no one's gonna come.
Cool. Bye, you guys, and take care.
Bye. Bye, Neerja.
Bye.